مسعود عيونه كبار وسود لا بياكل لا بيشبع عمي ابو مسعود بيتبهدل لانه قوت ما معه حق وقوت بالاخر بيضرب مرته لا يحس عنده نفوذ اشرف له بالخليج بس الكحول ما فيش مشترى اوتوبيس بالدين وبالطفنيس كل ما يضوي الراديو ما بيسمع غير تشويش
Hello, we're live. Hi everyone, thanks so much for tuning into this edition of AWAN Xtra, where we will be discussing the future of performance after lockdown with some truly inspiring women from across the Arab world. So we have Munya Akel, we have Aisha Jabour, and we have Taghreed Shukair Bizoso, and I'm Layla Alj. A big thank you to Asad and Aaron, who have worked really hard behind the scenes to make all of these AWAN Xtra events happen. For those of you who aren't familiar with AWAN, the AWAN Festival usually takes place every year during the month of March, but was cut short this year because of lockdown. And AWAN Xtra has been a way of keeping in touch with the community during these difficult times. So all of these events have featured Arab women artists from the UK and beyond. And social distance has been bridged with arts, performances, and special events, all happening online. The next AWAN Xtra event coming up is on August 1st, which is the second edition of Poets in Lockdown. So please do look out for that on social media if you are interested. So for this talk, we wanted to bring together women who work in different aspects of performance. So they all have different experiences and insight on how they see the way we make performance changing, both on a local level where we all live and work, and then also on a global level. And we wanted to specifically discuss how we see that affecting women artists. We will be looking out for questions, and then we'll make sure to answer as many questions as you have. So please do pop them into the chat as we go along. Cool. So I'll ask each of you to give us a short introduction, who you are, what you do, where you're based. If we can start with Aisha, then Taghrib, and then Munya.
Sure. Hi, I'm Aisha Jabor. I'm a Moroccan American filmmaker and casting director, a born and bred New Yorker. And right now I'm based in between Casablanca and New York, but primarily in Morocco.
Hi, so I'm the senior programmer and producer at Shabak Festival, and Shabak Festival is a biannual festival of contemporary Arab culture here in London. I'm also a performance maker and a facilitator. I grew up in Beirut. I'm half Spanish, half Lebanese, and moved to the UK almost 14 years ago.
Hi, I'm Munya. I'm Lebanese. I live between Beirut and New York, but right now primarily in Beirut. I'm a writer and director. I studied architecture in my past life, but then studied filmmaking in New York at Columbia, and then I've been working as a director since.
Great. So Munya, when we spoke, we'll start off with you. You were telling me about your the film that you were getting ready to shoot, and it was kind of a like very much of life imitates art situation with your new film, and then watching some of your other work like Submarine. You can't help but think of the protests about the garbage that was happening in Lebanon around the same time. So yeah, I was wondering if you could talk to us about without giving too much away, but how the whole process of this film you were getting ready to shoot has been affected, and how you've had to adapt and alter.
Yes, uh, it really feels that with the making of this film that it's like we always say at the office, we're dancing on the edge of a volcano. It feels like we're trying to make something happen against all odds. Making a film without all of the factors that are coming in right now is already it's already like exceptional if it happens. So right now with what's happening in the country and with the pandemic, it really feels like we're up against so many different challenges, but the team spirit is what's keeping us all sane. It's as if we're all holding on to this film as if it's like kind of like it's allowing us to stay hopeful because there's something we're fighting for. It's like our own little revolution because it's also a film that talks about a lot of the things that we're going through right now. And it is about a family that chooses that it has lost hope in humanity and that this decides 8 years before the film starts to live in isolation from the world. It's a family that creates a little paradise and chooses a new social environment that is based on isolation and that rests on the fear of the outside. So during confinement, I think that living this isolation and this lack of human physical connection and this fear of what the air started representing really allowed me to understand my characters much better because I understood the sacrifices that come with these types of choices. Maybe not as much as them, but at least I got a taste of it. And in terms of how it has been affected, um, I guess like everyone, a lot of the work has been moved online and then started going back into the world when the country deconfined.
Yeah, and I know at least in the UK they've introduced all these like um, COVID measures on how to make work safely. Is any of that the case for you, or have you kind of is this something that you're having to come up with on your own as as you prep for the shoot?
Uh, of course, we're gonna go through all of the safety measures, but what's funny is that right now in Lebanon, the tragedy that is happening and with the economic collapse and with all of the broken dreams that surround us, it feels like COVID is a little bit in the background. Of course, we're being safe and we're planning a shoot that will be absolutely safe health wise, but there are so many bigger things that we're dealing with right now that almost make us miss when COVID was the only problem, if you know what I mean. It feels like right now Beirut is like filled with melancholy and pain and I guess COVID just pushed things a little bit farther, but we'll figure it out the way we always do. But I guess we're tired of being resilient at this point. We want change.
You deserve a break, definitely. Is there anything anyone else wanted to add to this? Tahrid, I thought this was actually a good segue into some of the work that you do as well, like as the use of technology in performance is, it's almost like, you know, not that you saw COVID coming, but you have been using that a lot with your project at home in Gaza and London, not because of the pandemic, but because of, you know, physically it was, you know, it's not possible to get to work with performers in Gaza, and I know you've got some exciting things in the work as well with kind of developing that work. Yeah, what can you tell us about you know, the use of technology in performance and how you see that kind of growing and becoming more important as we figure out how to make performance?
So at home in Gaza, London, is a digital project that myself and brilliant collaborators, Station House Opera, and teams both here in London and in Gaza created together. And it started on the cusp of 2015 and 2016. And it wasn't really to innovate. It was the impulse was that it was a digital project that grew out of necessity, and technology was the medium that we needed in order to somehow break the siege and create this third shared space with artists and audiences in Gaza. And in a way, I you know, we were at the time we were using this program called Isadora, and Zoom was still in a beta version, so we were almost their lab rats in a way. So as I see how Zoom has developed now and the potentials for it, yeah, I mean, alongside, of course, all its security breaches, which are quite worrying. But I can see just how much the digital sphere has developed as well out of necessity. But at the time, you know, this project continued up until 2018, and in this, with us, really, the technology was political. You know, we know that technology is a threat to oppressive regimes and colonial powers, but very literally, you know, when we did try to get equipment into Gaza, it was confiscated by Israeli authorities. And you know, now where I see the digital realm going is it has become again, it has reemerged out of necessity, and there's a shared ownership to it. There's a widened availability that has democratized it, of course, notwithstanding that it's available to those that can afford internet. But you asked me where I'm going next with it, and there's a new project that is still in its very infancy, and really, I think, again, I'm navigating the need for it, because while we're extremely focused on COVID-19 and its repercussions here in the UK, we have to remember, and as Munya has pointed out, this resilience that artists and culture makers have had to endure way before this pandemic. So, you know, for example, one of the theaters we worked in Gaza, Al-Mshar Theater, was bombed in 2018. The directors, just yesterday, 2 days ago, the directors of the Edward Said Conservatory of Music and Yabous Cultural Center in Palestine were arrested. So people in Palestine have had to live with lockdown similar measures in addition to bombing for generations. Same with the economic collapse in Lebanon amidst the uprisings, and also, if we're going to talk about what the pandemic has done to the arts and culture and performance sphere, we have to remember that people have been excluded long before and continue to be excluded based on their race, specifically even in the Arab world. Unfortunately, migrant workers who are majority Black and brown people don't have any semblance of a dignified life, yet alone social and cultural well-being. So I think when we speak about the pandemic, in the UK and the US and the Arab world as the topic of this discussion, is that we remember that, this resilience is not new. We're just experiencing it on a global scale. And also that we acknowledge that it's an exhausting and demoralizing resilience, and think about the many whose works we will never get to witness, and also the contextualization of this resilience, that when we invite artists who undergo these hardships to present their work on an international scale, on international platforms, that the resilience isn't romanticized as well.
Yeah. I think, yeah, definitely that's extremely important to keep in mind, and I guess the discussion is, how do we build the tools to make sure we make that happen. Great. We'll move on to Aisha. Can you hear me? I think you've frozen. No, I think she's frozen. We'll and then Taghrida, along with your work with Shubak as a programmer and producer, how do you see kind of the changing world? How will we be programming art and producing art differently? I think what you guys have done so brilliantly was with Shubak Young Producers. You were able to create content very quickly that went online at the beginning of lockdown, and that was really exciting and inspiring. And also, as you mentioned, majority of your young producers are all female, so that's always great and exciting, and a wonderful way to encourage young artists. But yeah, how do you see that going forward? How will Shubak 2021 be different as a result of the pandemic?
I think we aren't certain of the extent of this pandemic yet, or when post-pandemic even begins and then reverses back to this present moment. So I think this uncertainty could become the norm, essentially. And, I think performance hasn't stopped. The industry as we know it, and how it's been constructed to function within this capitalist system, has been brought to more or less of a halt. But I've seen several acts of performance that I think have been far more performative than anything I've ever seen in a building. And I think here a key moment of timing in response is to engage with young people, and as you mentioned, Young Shubak. I mean, the idea behind Young Shubak, they're a cohort of artists, curators, and producers, is that they, constantly. I'll be speaking more or less on within the UK context. Constantly, we ask ourselves, how can we bring in younger audiences? How can we attract the youth to these buildings that they might feel are kind of inaccessible or a little intimidating to them? And here the idea with Young Shubak was that let's create a platform that is managed by young people, not just the work that's shared is made by young people, but the platforms are driven by young people, because they're the voices that know that are. Hello?
Yes.
We hear you.
We can hear you. Oh, she's gone. Okay, well, as she comes back, I actually think that that's a good segue into something, Aisha, you and I briefly touched on was, you know, how do we empower women and people who might not have opportunities to, you know, to work and get experience. Like when we chatted, and you know, I was asking you as a casting director, what do you see as the biggest hindrance for female performers, and you said the lack of roles, which is, you know, I think what we all know. And then we kind of, the discussion went into kind of, you know, behind the scenes, how do you get, you know, how can we encourage people to get young filmmakers and producers and other people who work in the industry to shadow them. So yeah, I'm wondering, could you talk to us more about the work that you do in Morocco, but, you know, as a casting director and a filmmaker, but the differences you see kind of working with the kind of big foreign productions, and then the work, the local work that's there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what you hit the nail on the head. It's kind of heartbreaking because I meet so many actresses, and I think they think I'm not calling them for the roles, but they don't realize the roles just don't exist for the most part. It's just overwhelmingly like when you have male writers and male, you know, content creators, I think it's just a trickle down. So a lot of what we were talking about in our little pre-conversation was just the need for more female showrunners and more, you know, creators at the top, because there's only so much that so far you can push the envelope as a casting director. It really has to come from the top down. And, you know, luckily here in Morocco, I've been blessed to work with amazing female directors and amazing female line producers. So they definitely create a different working environment and give a, you know, pass the buck forward and pass the baton and give you know, female crew members a shot. But in terms of, you know, actors and creating roles, it really has to come from the writers, I think.
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we say performance, it's not just the people that an audience will end up seeing on a screen or on a stage. It's everyone that's working to make that happen. And it's about, you know, it's about having a female gaze. It's about having these different voices and telling stories differently. So it's important to remember to include all of these other roles that, you know, that a performance wouldn't happen without them. We have a question that came in, which I think everyone will have an opportunity to answer and probably has experience in. So how much do you think work by being a resident? Okay, how much do you think your work is influenced and improved by by living in an Arab country versus being living abroad, so in the UK, for example? I think, yeah, I mean, we all have experiences living in both. So I think that is something that that we might all have something to say about.
Yeah, I can.
I mean,
let's have Munya go first, and then Aisha.
go ahead.
I think there's something about living in constant uncertainty that generates something powerful, because it forces you to question things and to do a lot of introspection, because the possibilities are so infinite, and the state of constant chaos, even though it's absolutely draining, it makes you, I don't know, it makes you question things. And I think this is one thing that I've experienced during the beginning of the pandemic, is that for once I felt like I shared the state of uncertainty with the rest of the world on some level. and it allowed me to connect to others in a different way because of that, because I felt less isolated in that sense. Um, and I like the spreadable nature of a disease just makes you aware of how connected we all are, and I think just living every day as if anything can change tomorrow morning can be exhausting, but also bring infinite possibilities in terms of how you live your life.
Aisha, did you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was going to speak to the question about what it's like to be an artist abroad versus here in Morocco. And I will say it's hard to be an artist anywhere. I think living here, people have the perception that back in the US and LA or Los Angeles, there's just opportunities raining from the sky, but we all know that that's not true. But, I see people here creating a lot of very rich work.
I think we've lost her again. Oh, yeah.
Obviously, out of necessity, artists birth things. And
Aisha, we lost you a bit. I think the last thing we heard you say was, I think the last thing we heard you say was, I've seen a lot of artists here create a lot of very rich work. Oh, she's gone. All right. Well, I mean, I can speak to that a bit as well. I'm a performer and I'm based in London. I've been here for 10 years, and I think I've worked in Morocco, but I've never lived in practice my profession back home. But it's definitely something that's been on my mind of this idea of belonging, and and ultimately, I think it, touching to what Munya was saying, it's like, the family, your chosen family is everywhere, and hopefully, I think what can come out of this is if we're able to build connections and opportunities that don't only rely on physical contact, then that will come out of this stronger in a way, and with added links and added opportunities and added connections.
I might share something that will bring a little bit of comic relief to us. As soon as that question came up, I've just been searching through my emails, because in December of 2015, this was when I was primarily performing acting, and my agent sent me this. So you have a meeting for this character with X, a casting director at her office at 11:10 tomorrow, 10th of December. I need a Middle Eastern looking girl, but intelligent and sharp. The summary of the project was John Harmon, they've mispronounced the next word, pseudo-retired American government agent, is hired to wipe out the unholy alliance between a Mexican drug cartel and an Islamic extremist organization smuggling its members into the US over the US southern border. So that was what was coming through my inbox on a regular basis for what people wanted as a Middle Eastern looking girl, but intelligent and sharp. And that had, growing up in Beirut and making theater in Beirut, I had never thought of what these absolutely simplistic and incredibly insulting parameters were being worked under outside in the US and the UK. I wrote back to my agent, and I wrote a letter to the casting director, and I asked her to please pass it on. And my agent said, I respect why you're not going to go through, but I'm not going to pass it on to the casting director because it's her livelihood and she's got to work as well. And I think things are different now. That's something that I'm really advocate for the cultural landscape in the UK for these types of absolutely, destructive work practices. I think today that letter may have been shared, and if not, I would have sent it directly to the casting director and those who were creating this film.
Yeah.
And I think you notice that in different scales, that even as a director, I feel like what is expected of my work in certain places is work that I don't want to be doing. It's like I don't want to be just providing what other people want to see of what comes from our countries, and that can be frustrating because it's like people want to tell you which stories you should be telling, and it's frustrating often.
Yeah. And do you feel that you're maybe might be penalized as a result of that because you don't want to be ticking those boxes, and therefore you might miss out on funding opportunities, or
But
as a
but
result?
I mean, maybe certain directors are for sure, but I wouldn't say these are missed opportunities because I think that it's important to let people tell their own stories. So it's okay if those opportunities come. Yeah.
Yeah. We have another. Aisha, you're back with us?
She's back.
I'm back.
Great. Do you wanna pick up where you left off? Do you remember?
No, that's okay. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Well, we have another question that's come in. What top tips would you provide young women that would like to start a career in the arts during the current climate? Well, I was approached on Twitter by a young actress who was kind of similar background to myself, and she was like, "Can you give me any tips?" Which made me feel really old. But I think what this lockdown period has given, I can speak from a kind of performer um, perspective, is all the admin that you have to do, and kind of preparing yourself, doing all the kind of admin backlog work that is necessary. I think that's been an opportunity to do that, and just get all of that ready so that you have your whatever you need, show reel, voice reel, letters, contacts. It's been a time to a lot of TV time, just be up to date with who's doing just doing all that work, so that you're knowledgeable about your career, I guess. And yeah, I think just being open and approaching people. I think certainly what I've found is that people are a lot nicer than they are intimidating, and most people do want to help. So that would be my tip.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
I'd say don't feel pressured to take work for free. Art is labor. So absolutely negotiate. And if you are told that there is no budget, ask for the budget sheets and ask for utmost transparency. I think it's really, really important for us all to work towards an industry that is transparent and that recognizes art as work.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think we're all doing this together. So anytime I take free work, that's everyone else expected to take free work, and that's not fair. And I think we'll only be stronger together. So thank you for that, Sadi. Any top tips?
I
I
think
would say
one
the
thing.
more.
Sorry, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Aisha. Oh no, Munya, you go.
She's gone again.
She's gone again.
Oh, no. I feel like every time she tries to speak, the computer bugs. I think one thing, I mean, in addition to what you guys have said, I think work-life balance is so important because we've chosen an industry that could make you sometimes think that you should put all of your heart and soul 24/7. And I think that the moments where I was the most proud of my work were the moments where I knew how to divide my day between self-care, family time, friends time, and hard work. I think discipline is what we sometimes, discipline means a certain amount of focused hours, but not forgetting how important it is to live life in order to be able to be writing about life. And I think this is one of the things that was the most, because obviously during confinement there are two different experiences of confinement. One of them is painful isolation, and the other one is the having had an isolation that involved a bit more introspection. And I was lucky enough to be confined with family. So it allowed me to understand that I was being given time that I never gave myself before. Time to take care of people, of myself. And I think that this is time that we sometimes choose to not give ourselves when we are workaholics and when our job makes us think that we should work all the time. So I think it's really, for me, my biggest learning um, lesson was to understand how important it is to um, divide your time in a way that's healthy.
Yeah, and on that note of kind of the family units and the kind of communities of care that we've we've established within our units, I think there's also the idea that that community of care expands beyond, and
Yeah,
and that those networks also affect your work as an artist and how you approach a
absolutely.
project. Because for example, it's been a terrifying time for freelance artists. And I've seen so many of my actor friends, technicians, directors take on other jobs, but also a lot of voluntary jobs, which involved kind of mutual aid groups where they've helped those that are vulnerable, access to food and shelter and mobility. And then I wondered, well, I don't think that's going to disappear. I think we're all going to come back to the buildings and the theatres and the projects, but I think those that have been doing this for the past 4 or 5 months, they're not going to shed it away. So I have a real hope that there will be this interdependency, and this community of care will absolutely seep into our work culture as well. And so I would, as a young artist, I would really encourage that you embrace that you know that those networks can exist, and that it doesn't have to be a cold, cruel industry that is extremely exclusive, that there are modes of accessibility, and you can create those too, and you can insist for them as well.
Yeah, and it comes from really like choosing the right people to surround yourself with and really giving them so much, and then creating this network of just giving and receiving. And I honestly wouldn't have been in this industry if it wasn't for the family that I've built around it. And I was lucky enough to find those people. And I think you don't find them if you don't go looking for them. They exist, and it can be a very painful industry to be in, but if you are surrounded by the right people, then you can change the world like with them. And this is why these conversations are very important.
Aisha, you're back. Hopefully you won't disappear as soon as you start speaking.
Sorry,
Did
guys, I'm in
did you have a
Africa. The
tip?
Wi-Fi here. um, so I lost track of where we were at in the conversation.
We're still on kind of what tips can you give to to a young person starting out in this business?
Oh yeah, what I was gonna say is I think the more technically proficient you can be as an artist, and also financially proficient, the better. But I would say the things that have the skills that have helped me the most as a filmmaker are knowing how to edit for yourself, knowing how to operate a camera for yourself. These are things that you can learn online now. You don't need to go to film school. So I think the more you're spending your downtime looking for projects, developing your toolkit, the more empowered you'll be to create your own work and not be dependent on other people and have to pay other people to do things that you could very well learn to do with time well by yourself. And yeah, knowledge is power.
Great. We've got some more questions. I think this was the previous question we had was like, do you find it harder to do your job in your country of origin or your country of residence? So I guess it's working as an art, abroad, being a kind of outsider, insider, I guess, kind of perspective.
I feel like, yeah, I mean, I feel like the film family is like travels really well. So I wouldn't be able to answer this question because it feels like both offers its own pros and cons. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, I think both definitely have pros and cons. I think there's this desire to find success abroad in the West, I guess, is what is, because the markets are bigger, because there is more money, because all of that. But so yeah, I think harder and but mostly different, I guess. It's a lot of kind of small fish in a big pond, or a big fish in a small pond as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah, no, I was adding to what you were saying. I do feel like the filmmaker I've become was born out of the Lebanese woman I am, and then I started building on that. And of course, New York brought a whole new perspective to what I wanted to do as a filmmaker because I understood a little bit how I wanted to use films. But I would be nothing without this land that I was fortunate and not fortunate to be born in.
yeah, and also I think anything more we can experience just makes us stronger and expands our sphere of knowledge and influence. So it's yeah. And then
For me, it's been interesting working between the two. Here in Morocco, there's not a lot of structure when it comes to the world of casting. So it's been kind of exciting to create my own path and not feel so limited to the way that necessarily Hollywood does things. On the other hand, sometimes that lack of structure, I think, can leave artists feeling a bit lost, and we depend a lot on the Arab telephone, so to say, to make connections with artists and actors. So I think it can be a good thing because you get a lot more personal contact with the actors and the artists. But on the other hand, it might leave some people feeling a bit clueless about how to get into the pool, sort of.
Yeah, but that's how we met. Aisha got in touch with me on Instagram because I was in Morocco and we had a friend in common, and she was casting something, and so like that's the beauty of being free to, but then also it's, I guess what you're doing, Aisha, is you're able to introduce structure, and you're able to introduce processes in a system where they don't exist yet, or they exist differently. So I think that's also exciting. It's more of there's a lot more to do, and you get to, where it means that you're maybe not stuck, like you said, in very regimented systems, that it's you get a lot of like, that's just the way it is, that's just the way the industry is, and no one actually questions the whens or the whys, and then they're harder to dismantle. So I think that's also exciting in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And there's a lot
absolutely.
of advantages that come from lack of structure. And there are things that I probably wouldn't have been able to do in some of my film sets if I was in New York. So I complain about the chaos, but of course we use it when it's to the advantage of making things happen, because there are you can bend things a little bit more, and then you can complain about it when it's frustrating.
Yeah, I've definitely seen myself get more I'm more uptight than I think I am in whenever I've worked, like not in like not in London where everyone's very prompt, and and you know what the rules are, and you know what that world is. But it's also been a good reminder for myself to be more flexible and to relax. And it's only when I've done that that I've been able to learn and grow from that experience.
There are, I mean, there's here in the UK, there is an infrastructure of support. There's governmental spending directly to the arts world that isn't at all, there's no semblance of that at all in the Arab world. But I do think that there's a spontaneity and this lack of kind of legal structures that allows you to get away with more. There is more risk taking. At the same time, there's more censorship. So we don't have to deal with those systems of censorship or crackdowns on freedom of expression that we do have in the Middle East and North Africa. So I think we do, rather than thinking of it as a black and white scenario, that it's that we think of it more transnationally, and what each project is, and who is it for? So is it for an audience in Lebanon, or is it for an audience here in London? Who am I making it with? And I think start with that, because it's in the power of the work itself. We adapt, as makers, you can adapt, but where's the work needed?
Yeah. Okay, so sorry, we've got some questions. Being a woman, do you find it easier to have support where you now live than in your country of origins? So I guess, is it easier to get support? I'm going to assume financial, I guess, coming from the US, the UK, abroad, as opposed to getting the support you need for funding projects in Lebanon and Morocco.
We definitely don't get support from Lebanon. Our government doesn't shit about cinema or nothing else for it. So that's me.
Yeah. And then, as a woman specifically, do you find that maybe you have more opportunities with funding than maybe a male counterpart, because there won't be.
I think that certain people are more inclined to help women because of their history, and because of the fact that they didn't get any support for such a long time, and that's fine for me. But I think in the Middle East, I don't feel this separation between getting support as a woman or as a man, simply because the funds come from certain areas, and because in Lebanon there's no support whatsoever from the government or anything like that. So, but I would love to hear you guys' answers.
Yeah, Aisha, how much do you know about funding in Morocco with film? There is a fund for film, and during lockdown they've been the CCM, so the Centre Cinématographique Marocain, and they have been streaming like films for free, Moroccan films for free, which has been great. And for a lot of us, our only opportunities to watch these Moroccan films, and what we said with Aisha is, like, there is a majority of male filmmakers. I mean, that's just the reality of a lot of places, and I guess, what can we do to push for more more parity in more gender parity, and just is it about so there's that. And then there's a question that I think that is directed more specifically to Aisha. That someone said, I've heard that in Morocco, casting directors as well as line producers are not too fond of dealing with international agents, managers. How much of this is true?
I've heard that rumor also. I would say probably it's true with the bad casting directors and the crappier productions that you wouldn't want to work with anyway. If they're scared of working with agents and managers, it's because they're scared of accountability. And so that's a red flag. I'm not scared to work with agents and managers, and the productions I work with aren't scared to work with agents and managers from all over the world. So I would seriously question that roadblock if you come against it as a performer. Why does it exist? Is it a language barrier? Is it that they don't know perhaps how to negotiate with managers and agents? I mean, that's valid if it's a communication issue, but maybe as a performer, you can help facilitate that, if you are, bilingual. Yeah, and to go back to your other question about female representation from the filmmakers here, I would say I'm always pleasantly surprised actually by the amount of female crew members I see working with me on our productions here. And we talked about that. I think it really comes from the top down when you have a female line producer or female production manager. They're just more willing to give those opportunities. And then, perhaps a space for change just comes from obviously having more conversations. But one of the benefits of living in such a small country is you have access to people you wouldn't have access to in, abroad. You have access to get into somebody's email box or have coffee with someone who maybe is more of a decision maker. So I think just being prepared to have those conversations, you never know who you could sway.
Yeah. Or WhatsApp. All business is done on WhatsApp, as I've come to learn in Morocco, definitely. There was how would you share your vision of moving on with performance projects, while in lockdown, with many theaters shutting down and then festivals being postponed? I think we've seen a lot of stuff moving online, and Tagharid, I'm sure you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely, the digital sphere, but also kind of work outside buildings. I think there are huge potentialities, not just kind of aesthetically or conceptually, but also in community building and in reaching audiences that may not otherwise go through galleries and theaters. It's not easy. It is a case at the moment where plans for festivals are constantly being reimagined and reconfigured, and it's extremely draining and tiring, of course. We're still planned for June, July 2021. We're still going ahead, and I do think that it's really important to turn to artists and artists' ideas and artists' ways of navigating crises as well. That I don't think we need to be absolutely frightened or kind of suddenly gatekeeping. What can happen when we're hit by trauma or crisis is that, especially those in power, you suddenly become extremely territorial and you just want to clutch on to whatever you have. So I've heard a lot of people, I've kind of heard two different dialectics. One is that, those that have been marginalized and work by artists who are, not currently represented enough, will be sidelined and marginalized even more. And then I've heard the other point of view is that this is a time for us to reset how we work, how institutions work, and how we navigate this cultural sphere, and that it's possible to create work that's much more inclusive, that reduces particularly socioeconomic barriers, because that's kind of one of the main barriers that have been recently identified that previously hadn't been shed so much light on. And so now let's move from a space where it's kind of beyond language but more action based. So there are these two dialectics, and I think I hope for festivals and venues to think about truly and start implementing steps for inclusivity, and for work that is absolutely urgent and bold, and that, you know, might shake the status quo, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I think certainly on a social level, I definitely think things are changing, and people, you know, even if it's only because we have time to become involved because we're all stuck at home, is I think there is a real kind of need and thirst for social change that is happening within our arts buildings, and the way we make art. So, you know, I've certainly seen it with just, yeah, different Zoom calls I've attended on representation and on on minority representation in the arts. And so I think that's the good thing I am taking out of this whole pandemic situation, and certainly one that I'm, you know, keen to continue working in and being involved in. We've got one more question coming in, and then we don't have a lot of time left. This question: as women who wish to empower women, when taking forward a project, do you tend to have a maximum of women on the tech team, or is it a 50-50? I guess it. Yeah, Munya, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for example, on my feature film, I think it's like 80% of the team are women, and it's not because I specifically, you know, like I think that the film industry in Lebanon is made of people that are challenging the system, and that's why naturally things came through. Of course, if it didn't come naturally this way, I would make the effort to hire women, and especially the women who don't necessarily know how to reach the certain areas of work. But I'm happy to realize that most of our team naturally came to be a majority of women, and I think it's really important for women to continue supporting women when they're not close to opportunities, especially in countries like these where maybe not in the film industry in Lebanon, but in other industries as well, where it's hard to get somewhere if you're not connected to the patriarchal structure that holds something together.
Definitely.
Yeah. And
Go ahead. I was just going to say we need to wrap up if anyone wanted to say something.
I was just going to come back to, you know, when I dropped out talking about Young Shabak and that the majority are women.
Yeah.
And that wasn't intentional, but we have to, you know, what happens is that, again, most of cultural workers are women. What happens is that then through the pyramid, women don't tend to get in positions of leadership. Of course, that's changing. Yeah, but it's incredible to see the work of Young Shabak. I'd highly recommend that you do check it out via our website and social media and so on.
I second that. They're great. I mean, I definitely wasn't like that between the ages of 18 and 25. I think it's really inspiring to see the amazing work that they do, and they do it with such like confidence and intelligence. So it's wonderful.
There is one man. There is one person who identifies as male that is part of the group as well. Because I think I said they're all women, but.
Great. Any final remarks?
From us?
Yeah, from you.
Well,
No, I'm just
no,
having
saying it's
a conversation.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I really hope that this conversation can continue outside of this this online one hour chat. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and anyone who watches it afterwards. It's going to be on YouTube on the AWAN YouTube channel. So thanks again to AWAN, Asser, and Erin, and of course to Tahrid, Aisha, and Munya. Yeah, thanks for agreeing to do this. And I hope we all stay in touch, and I look forward to watching all your films and seeing all of your performances.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, thank you. That's us wrapped.